It was 1976, living in the 70s. As a 16-year-old, the year ahead stretched out before me full of promise and opportunities. I was pretty sure how this year was going to play out. I was having some success academically. I had just recently got my driver's license and I was holding down a part-time job. Where I expected to experience the most success, however, was in the sporting arena, particularly soccer. I was an avid soccer player and I had been a South Canterbury representative since the under-12s, travelling all over the South Island to play in various tournaments. I had just returned from participating in a New Zealand-wide high school tournament, at the end of which I was selected as a member of the best of tournament team, alongside some of the best players in the country. And yes, ladies, that blonde is totally natural. Eat your hearts out. As well as playing inter-school soccer, I was also playing in a Saturday afternoon men's league against players who are twice my size and twice my age. And it seemed, with all the experience that I had as a player, it was not hard to imagine that I would just go on to play at higher and higher levels. Yes, as the new year dawned, the script of my life for the next 12 months seemed to already have been written. Except that was not how 1976 was to play out at all. I had never really been interested in religion, mainly because I was brought up in a home divided by it. My mother raised the girls in the family as strict Adventists, and her fundamentalist tendencies left me with a fairly negative impression of Adventism, and religion generally, I might add. My father raised us boys as Anglicans, but the liturgical nature of the worship services and all that high church tradition and rituals that went along with that just left me feeling cold. In fact, the only way my father managed to persuade my brother and I to go to church most Sundays was to promise us fish and chips from the local chip shop, just immediately across the road from the church, as a reward for sitting through an hour of boredom. By the way, dads, there's an awesome fish and chip shop just across the road there, so if you're ever having trouble persuading your kids to come to church, you might want to try that one. It might work for you. Enough to say that I had a fairly negative view of religion and certainly did not see it as a big part of my future. But that year, my sister started to bring around to our family home a friend of hers from the Adventist church. And this girl and I became close, and it wasn't long before we were in a relationship together. And as a result of that attachment, I was drawn into the wider circles of young people in the Adventist church. And to my surprise, I found that I just loved hanging out with these people. I began to spend every weekend socialising with them and less time with my high school buddies, who I'd often been drinking with on weekends. There was something different about these young people. They didn't need the crutches of cigarettes and alcohol to have a good time. They didn't need to swear every third or fourth word to show how cool they were. Their joking around was not mean or cruel. I was introduced to this weird and wonderful world of progressive teas and car rallies and Saturday night roller skating, singing around bonfires on the beach, and gradually I began to experience true community for the first time in my life. By the end of the year, I had made the decision to be baptised into the church, and this meant giving up Saturday soccer, which was one of the hardest things that I think I've ever had to do at any point in my life, particularly because it came with all that awkwardness of trying to explain to my coach why exactly I was giving soccer away. Also, the difficulty of trying to explain to my father why I was becoming an Adventist and giving soccer away, when he had faithfully attended every single one of my matches since I began playing in the under-10s. He had been there faithfully every single weekend. And it took him a very long time to accept my decision. And then 6 months on from being baptised, I was winging my way across the Tasman to begin studies at Avondale College. But I did so without Dad's blessing, and I certainly did it without his financial support. He told me that would be a consequence of deciding to go to Avondale College. I started that year with no expectation of encountering God at all. No expectation of finding religion or ending up in a religious college for that matter. But somewhere amidst all the plans and the expectations that I had for my life as a teenager, God chose to reframe the story of my life, to reframe my future and take me down a path that I never imagined that I would travel. Now, my story is not a profoundly dramatic one. Some of you here would have far more awe-inspiring stories to tell, and it would be great if you were prepared to actually do that when invited. But the thing that we would all have in common that would link our stories is the reality of God. How he has made himself real to each one of us by stepping into our lives at some point and reframing our hopes, our dreams, and our aspirations, and taking us on a journey to where we are here today. Here we are, living in community, contributing our talents, sharing what God hardwired each one of us to be and to do, passionate and hopeful about the life to come, most of all finding purpose and meaning in the life, the friends, the family that he has blessed you and me with. No one can transform a human life like God can. He maximizes the potential of a life when we allow him to direct us down a path that, left to ourselves, we would never have thought or dared to go. It shouldn't surprise us, though, that our story, our personal story, is the story of this world. Since the fall of mankind, God has been reframing lives and reframing the destiny of this planet and all its people. One day, God came to a man by the name of Abram, and he said, Abram, you could stay here in the city of Ur if you want to, and you could become just another wealthy farmer, just another successful businessman, and live out a quiet, respectable life. But it's not what I have in mind for you. I want you to reframe not only your future, but your definition of what success is all about. I want you to move to a land that I will show you, and there you will become more than just a successful farmer. You will become the father of nations. One day God came to a man by the name of Jeremiah, and he said, Jeremiah, your desire is to marry and have children and just be normal like everybody else. But Jeremiah, I want you to reframe your future because I have chosen you for a great work, and it's one that only you can do. And because I have known you from when you were a child in the womb, I know you can do this. God comes to a boy named David, and he tells him that he's about to reframe his future. The shepherd boy will become a king. And then one day he comes to a young woman by the name of Mary, a poor peasant girl, and he tells her that he's about to reframe her future as well. She will no longer be known as simply the wife of a man called Joseph, but she will be the mother of the Son of God. And so on throughout Scripture. Finally, God sends us Jesus, the great reframer, who would not only reshape the destiny of mankind through his death, but would teach with such power and authority with phrases like, you have heard it said, but I say unto you. Jesus came to expand people's minds, to help them visualize realities that they could not yet see. Jesus reframed our concept of who our neighbour is. To the lady at the well, Jesus reframed the nature of true worship. To the Sanhedrin, Jesus reframed their understanding of what it meant to truly serve others and feed his sheep. He also reframed how to authentically keep the Sabbath. To the disciples, Jesus reframed their ideas about who was the greatest in the kingdom. The large majority of Jesus' teachings in his 3 years of ministry were all about reframing people's understanding of the things that truly mattered in life, the things that are core to your happiness and to your hope. But God is not alone in his work of reframing and reshaping the world. You and I, as Christ followers in our generation, are called upon to reframe this generation's view of God by what we teach, by what we believe, and by what we live out. Christ followers in every generation have been called to do the same. For it is through the local church, the hope of the world, that God makes himself known to people who are far from him. Now more than ever, this generation is in desperate need of a community of people who will reframe aright the person and character of God for a generation that has forgotten why they even need him in the first place. The recent Australian census reminds us that we live in a society which is increasingly atheistic. It is heartbreaking to sane and sincere Christians around the world that in many people's mind, the church today is associated with child abuse, profiteering, the suppression of women, and the gatekeeper for all the archaic and outdated values that have ever been. I don't know about you, but my natural tendency is just to despair at the prospect of trying to reframe the nature and character of God in the eyes of people today who are openly hostile towards anything to do with him or religion. But that is the special place that God has chosen to give the church throughout history. Despite all its flaws and failings, it is called upon to faithfully represent the truth about God to each and every new generation. Given the poor reputation of the church today, it seems sometimes that we are without any mechanism whatsoever to influence a change in people's attitudes. But in truth, we have exactly the same weapons, for lack of a better word, that Jesus had available to him in speaking into the hostile generation to which he was called to reach. There may be nothing particularly profound or new about these weapons, but given the current climate, they may be all that we have left. And the first of those weapons is humility. Let us be humble in all our dealings with people, even when we disagree with their point of view. Remembering that whatever group you're tempted to diss, to criticise, or to put down, whatever you say, they are nevertheless sons and daughters of the Most High God. And they are deserving of your respect. Humility is what allows us to deflect or to absorb other people's anger and frustration. We don't have to be right. No. We don't have to win. We only need to be true to our own personal story, which no one can disprove because it's real, it's true, it happened, it's our story, and no one can take that away from us. There's a lot of issues confronting our society at this time that will lead to strong opinions on both sides of the fence. Such issues as marriage equality, we see that one playing out nightly at the moment, assisted dying, genetic engineering, stem cell research, and so on. Sometimes the best thing a Christ follower can do is simply listen and attempt to understand another's point of view, not being ashamed of expressing your own point of view when the opportunity arrives, but in the words of Peter, if you do this and you get a chance to do it with gentleness and respect. Amen. Yes. You might remember the story of Naaman the leper and how he was told that if he did one simple thing, his leprosy would be cured. All he had to do was go and take a dip in a nearby river that was just a little on the dirty side. Think the Yarra. His pride and his arrogance almost were his undoing, as he felt that it was beneath him to have to go and get a little dirty, even if it meant that his life could be spared by doing so. I wonder in our relationships with others how we can often try to win a person over without being prepared to get a little dirty first. By which I mean taking an interest in their lives, listening to them, offering encouraging words, building friendships, slowly but surely building that relationship. Sometimes it will take you years. You don't have the right to speak into another person's life until you're prepared to make that kind of investment. Humility works on the idea that as you navigate life with other people, you don't have to have all the answers or assume that your view or opinion is without a doubt the correct one before you even begin that conversation. That's humility. And the second of these weapons is service to others. Whatever other people might think about you and I, about Christ followers, one thing they will grudgingly admire is our willingness to get out and serve the community. Every time we step out to do something good in the name of the church and in the name of God, we reframe who God is in the minds of those looking on. It's easy to attack somebody for something that they believe, but it's much harder to attack somebody who is actually doing good. We reframe people's view of God every time we reach out to make a difference in our community. Each time we choose to feed the hungry, protect the vulnerable, and yes, all of those activities that we were recently involved in as a church. As Ellen White once wrote, the strongest argument in favour of the gospel is a loving and lovable Christian. To act selflessly actually puzzles many people because, you see, selfless behaviour does not come to you and I naturally. It doesn't come to any of us naturally since the fall. You and I don't need to learn how to be selfish because that comes naturally to us all. And so I think that's why people are always touched and moved by examples of selflessness, of volunteerism, and doing good in the community with no expectation of reward. The value of life is measured by how much of it was given away. Giving our life away is what makes it great. And research after research has shown a connection between people's health, their happiness, and their willingness to be selfless. How can it be that in pouring oneself out, one can be left feeling so full? Two-word answer, divine design. This is how you were created to be. You were created by God to live with open hands. God made us such that we would do better and be happier when we serve and give our lives away. So if you want to be happy, if you want to be remembered in this life, you have to find a way to give yourself away. The final weapon at our disposal is simply that of kindness. I told you these weren't profound ideas, but in the current context of Australian society, these may be the only arguments we have left to argue the case for God. Yeah. We show kindness when we see a need and we endeavour to meet it. Simple as that. Yeah. Kind people notice others. They notice them because their well-being and their happiness matter to the kind person. Yeah. Kind people don't see a need and then rationalise why they're not the right one to do something about it. The Bible tells us that by their fruits you shall know people. And God has asked us to show others what He is like by how we lavish love on those around us. So your task for the week, and it's one that I've given some years ago, but I want to do it again. It's just to be on the lookout for those opportunities where you can reframe this week how people see your Heavenly Father. And when you see and where you see an opening, I'd like you to just whisper to yourself as you engage in the moment, here's my chance. Here's my chance. And the idea here is that each moment that comes your way this week, there's going to be something difficult. There's going to be some relational problem, that I can assure you. And it's in those times that I want you to remember this is an opportunity to reflect Jesus here and now and reframe how these people view me and all those who claim to follow Jesus. Somebody's going to ask you for a favor this week, somebody that you don't want to help. Maybe it's a cranky person at work, and we all have them. Maybe it will mean giving them money. Maybe it will mean stopping and talking to them and finding out what their name is, finding out what it is that they really, really need. Maybe it will mean that you get to give them a gift, to write a note, to make a call, to volunteer, to go out of your way to somebody and communicate the idea that they matter. And instead of thinking of all of these things as interruptions, a pain in the neck, I wish I didn't have to do that, we're all going to say, here's my chance. Here's my chance to let this person see God through me. You'll be in a situation where somebody makes you mad. You'll be driving. You'll be in a hurry and some person's going to weave right in front of you and cut you off. Or somebody's going to step into the line at the supermarket in your place without any regard for the fact that they're pushing in. And in that moment, you're going to whisper, here's my chance. Here's my chance to show how a God-fearing, God-loving Christ follower acts. Remembering as we do this as a community over the coming week, and I want to end with these timeless, priceless words from Robert F. Kennedy. Remembering that as we do all of those things, that it is from numberless, diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time a man and a woman stands up for an ideal or acts to improve the lot of others or strikes out against injustice, she sends forth a tiny ripple of hope. And crossing each other from a million different centers of energy and daring, those ripples eventually build a current which can sweep down the mightiest walls of oppression and resistance. And friends, it is to that purpose that we are called today.